Our next speaker, Phaedra Boinodiris, and I totally get 10 bonus points for getting that right. I've got to write a bunch. Many of you may know that IBM is a leading organization in the gamification space. The company has done a whole bunch of incredibly cool things around gamification, from things in its Smarter Cities initiative to the Innovate platform. The company's done incredibly interesting gamification efforts focused at large enterprises primarily, but also government and industry. And behind the scenes, the engine driving this forward, the woman who's most closely associated with IBM's incredible gamification efforts and with the design of the work that they do over there, is Phaedra. And so I'm very excited to have her here with us today to talk about her perspective on this as one of the most seasoned designers of serious games and engagement systems. Phaedra Boinodiris.
Thank you. All right. Good morning, everybody. How many, just a show of hands, how many of you have been in this space for at least 5 years now? Who here has been there? Do you remember when you first started that when you ever used the word game, there would be this stigma? And people would think, oh, geez, what a waste of time, and you need to prove that we should even be giving you the time of day. And now suddenly, to solve every single problem within the organization, they're coming to you like, can you put this frosting on top of this, and somehow this is going to solve things? I think that it's really interesting. And coming back here, this is my second year here, just has really underscored it, just the change in the conversation. So I'm going to start off talking about employee engagement, in particular with a book called Drive that was written by Dan Pink. Has anybody read Dan Pink? Okay, so many of you. So for those who haven't read it, he talks about the different eras of humanity. And he says, if you think about the different eras, you started off with the agrarian era and then the industrial era, and what motivated us as people was really the carrot and the stick. Right? If you don't plow this land, your family is going to wither and die. But he says, with today's culture, with a knowledge worker of today, there's something very different that motivates us. Does anybody know what that is? Can you shout it out? I don't hear anything. Maybe it's the air ducts. But in essence, it's giving people a sense of self-direction. More than anything else, that's what people are seeking. And he goes on further to elaborate on this, and he talks a lot about self-direction being based on 3 tenets, and that's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And so we've really thought a lot about that. Anytime we're tackling something with regards to gamification as it pertains to employee engagement, we sort of use that as a foundation, and it has really been helpful to us. Employees are feeling terribly at employee engagement. If you think about it, if you've got over 70% of your employees disengaged, that means 30% of your employees care to be there. They're passionate about what they do. You can imagine what this does in terms of productivity. Enter in the realm of both serious games and gamification. Serious games and gamification can do a number of things on this list, right? And unfortunately, the formatting is a little bit off, but actually the holy grail for gamification is really cultural transformation, right? More than anything else, instead of just using a motivational design as a means to get your employees to put in 20 hours extra of work, the holy grail is how do you transform cultures? We're hearing this more and more often. How do you change the culture of work and the way people perceive the work environment? About 8 years ago, IBM partnered with a company out in Palo Alto called Curiosity. And together, we did a research project where we studied guild leaders in World of Warcraft. And in particular, what we were interested in was, what is it about these guild leaders that are able to pull together these global virtual teams, assess teammates' skill sets, relay mission objectives, and then perform after-action reviews, all in a virtual environment without ever meeting the other people face-to-face. Why do you think a company like IBM would be interested in that? I can't hear anything, but I'll tell you. I've been at IBM now for 7 years. I've met my manager maybe 3 times in person, right? So the ability to do everything that these guild leaders do so well and so innately is incredibly useful, incredibly important to be able to form these relationships and do these things. So we studied a lot of things in massively multiplayer online role-playing games. In addition to these guild leaders, we also looked carefully at the rotating leadership model. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but this is in essence, when a mission comes about to the team, you put the person in charge who has skill sets needed for that particular mission. It's a rotating leader based on the needs required right then and there. So we looked at the rotating leadership model. We also studied, in particular, character evolution. So with your typical MMO, you sign up as a particular character class, right? Like a sorceress or a warrior or a healer. And the basic premise is that as you complete missions, as you gather spells, as you gather weaponry, the way that you're depicted to the rest of your team, right, and the way that you see yourself changes over time. So your character evolves the stronger you get within the game. So one concept that we've taken away from this is, firstly, we purchased a company called Connexa a couple of years ago, and it's one of the leading assessment testing companies in the world, right? So if you want to find out what kind of a leader your employees are, you would take a Connexa assessment test. But imagine, instead of taking your typical test, you're playing a game to determine what kind of a leader you are. So in fact, we have partnered with a number of different companies who are doing just that. The video isn't playing. Oh, it is. There we go. Okay. So this company, this is a business partner of ours called Gravitalent, that in essence created this casual game to measure all kinds of different things about people. So imagine that through gameplay, you can determine how well does a person collaborate with others? What is their stress test level? What's their ability to be able to work through problems? And imagine that this, in addition to a number of other different things, actually helps organizations to determine a baseline for employees, okay? So imagine all of these thousands of data points that are assessed for employees as these employees complete missions or projects, as they complete training and certification, right? The way that their character is depicted visually changes over time. So these thousands of data points inform the creation of a visual representation of your resume. So imagine, because I like IT, because I like to lead through influence, all of these other things assessed about me, it says, okay, you are a blue swan. And the premise is that as I complete projects, just like in an MMO, as I complete training and certification, as I meet with mentors, the way that my character is visualized is transparent to my broader organization. Now, think about this also from an organizational perspective. Now, with this level of assessment, I can see throughout my broader organization, okay, this group of star performers that is just constantly meeting their quotas, they're constantly just kicking it out in the workforce. Look how many red dragons are in this group. What is it about this red dragon character class? What kinds of mentors have they met with? What kinds of projects? What was their training path? And additionally, this opens up a whole avenue with regards to career progression. Remember what I talked about earlier with regards to Dan Pink saying, we care about self-direction? So with something like this, you can start to see, okay, oops, I'm at Blue Swan now, and I really want to get to Red Dragon, right? For me to advance Blue Swan to Red Dragon, oops, maybe if I stand here, I need to complete these kinds of projects, right? I'm only a 43% match now, But for me to be able to advance and change my career path, I'm going to need to go through these other avenues. Additionally, organizations can start to use a marketplace approach with regards to career management. So if I, for example, am an organization that is in desperate need for Java programmers, I can weight that particular career path greater than others so that when my employees are looking at something like this, they can start to see, okay, you know, I'm at 43% match here, but there's this other path which my organization is telling me to take a look at. And again, having this be visual and having this be transparent is actually very culturally transforming, right? Because today, organizations, all of these things are siloed. Training and certification siloed, mentoring siloed, project progression, a skills assessment siloed. So what can you do with regards to techniques used in games to make this a more holistic approach? As always, with anything in the realm of gamification, whether it's employee motivation or employee engagement, customer engagement, always think about what is motivating to your audience. I was on my way to the airport. I was at a stoplight. And so, you know, I'm looking at my mobile phone goes off, and I'm looking at it, and I've got Waze up, W-A-Z-E. Do you guys use Waze? You familiar? Okay. I think Waze is doing a lot of things right, okay? Here I am, you know, I've got to pick my kid up from daycare. I've maybe left the coffee pot on, and here I am. I'm like, oh yeah, there's that cop around the corner. I better put that in, right? There's a pothole. And I'm thinking to myself, what is motivating me to sit here and take the time out to enter this into this application? Purely intrinsic motivation, right? Because I use Waze in order to get information regarding traffic from my community, and I feel a sense of needing to give back, as pure and simple as that. No need for leveling up or badging. I don't care if I'm holding the shield in Waze or not, but just something as simple as that, where I get immediate gratification from that. And as you consider what motivates your audience, it's really critical that you spend the majority of your time there versus jumping into how you're going to deploy. Because when you don't spend the time really thinking about your audience in particular and doing the research, you end up with this, what I call chocolate-covered broccoli, and you'll know it when you bite into it, right? You'll know it. I'm sure you have tasted this before. And again, really, really critical. Take the time, for example, to do what is called employee journey maps, customer journey maps. Do a profile of your employees or your customers. Take the time to figure out what is their day like. What are the different experience touch points where you might be able to reach them in ways that matter to them, right? That they care about. I'm going to segue now into the realm of serious games. So games can be incredibly adept at explaining complex systems. I've got StarCraft and SimCity up here as examples. Very, very adept. And IBM caught on to this quite a while ago because we actually started a series of games, first of all, to explain some of the complex systems which we're selling. So back in 2007, we created a game called Innovate, which helped to explain business process management to people, right? So if you're unfamiliar with business process management, it's basically any organization that makes anything, right? Whether it's a service or a product, there's a certain set of steps that organization needs to take in order to get these things out the door, meeting really important goals, whether it's profitability, customer satisfaction, you know, whatever the case might be. And so we put this concept of using a game to help explain this and how this works, because business process management is a rules engine, right? So that you might be able to better monitor how is it that organization can meet these goals again and again and again. So we created a game. The first one was used by over 1,000 universities worldwide within the space of 6 months. Many of these schools started to use it as part of their core curriculum to teach business process management. We then rolled out a second game because we wanted to see, gee, is it just schools or will business partners and customers use it? It actually became our #1 lead generating asset on the internet for the biggest brand in IBM. We then rolled out a city sim game because we wanted to show, really have people understand what smarter cities could mean for industries within municipalities, right? You've heard a lot about the Internet of Things and how more than ever before we're interconnected, right? What does this mean? I live in Cary, North Carolina, and I had wondered when designing this game, what would it take for me to buy an electrical car, plug it into my garage, and contribute back to a smarter grid? What does my utility need to do in terms of the kinds of investments they need to make in order to support that kind of innovation? And then when they do that, what's the ripple effect across other industries? And so we wanted to do a game that helped to start touching upon those kinds of conversations. And then that game became our #1 lead generating asset. So they can be very adept, again, at explaining complex systems. In fact, we're using serious games internally as a means to onboard architects. So when we want to explain how we do things like our own worldwide project management methodology, we've created a game in order to do so. And when we approach the game designs, we do it in such a way where we want to explain the philosophy as to why. Why should they care about this? Not just, we're going to give you this trivia game and you're going to do rote memorization and then you'll be quizzed at the end. But games give us the ability to fail in a safe way, right? So when they make missteps, they can actually start to see, oh, here's what the cascading effect is to the organization. So we found it to be really, really useful in this way. So if you're embarking on a serious games project for your organization, this is the 5-step approach, which I highly recommend. Always start off with what's the business use case? What's the return on investment need to be for your organization? Start off there because it's going to affect every design, every deployment from then on out. Document your learning and pain points well before getting into game design. And then the 3rd step is match the experience, matching the puzzles with what it is you're trying to relay. Because if you don't take the time to do that, you end up with chocolate-covered broccoli. Again, right? Like, make a game like World of Warcraft to teach database administration. Chocolate-covered broccoli, right? Once you've got that, you can determine your genre and your platform, and you've got to always determine or think about, how often does the content within this game need to change, right? How proprietary is the gaming engine? Can it be integrated into real data and real processes within my organization? Our CEO reached out to us because she's got this really cool initiative called Think 40. And everything that's top of her mind, she's invested quite a bit in training. So one of the big Think 40 events was around social business. She wanted to introduce the next generation of social business tools to IBMers worldwide. But in addition to that, she wanted to relay the philosophy that this is the way of how we're going to work collaboratively to solve complex problems for our customers. Okay? So she came to us, and we wanted to see, aside from the typical training, whether it's webcasts or white papers, how could we have people experience this, right? Actually experience it. Here's this problem. Everybody's going to work together to solve it. So we actually came up with an idea for an alternate reality game. So this game genre mixes the digital and the analog. And it's really, really highly dependent on having a fantastic story, because there's no badges, there's no prizes, there's no nothing, no points, no leaderboards. It is just getting to the end of the story, which is what's going to compel people to play. And it's over a hosted period. In this case, it was just 3 days. And we had to come up with a storyline that was compelling, such that 500,000 employees worldwide across gender lines, culture lines, age lines would be interested in it, interested in playing. So we actually came up with a number of versions of the storyline. Starting off with, there was this villain, and we all have to, protect ourselves against this villain who wants to just take over the planet's data, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That got canned because it was too dark. So we came up with some other ideas. We finally landed on this idea where we were about to announce our next grand challenge, our next big artificial intelligence. And right before this big announcement, where our AI was going to be playing in a tournament between players of a multiplayer real-time strategy game that allows people to manipulate time as a means to best each other, this AI designer goes missing. And so everybody has to work together in order to solve the problem and solve the mystery. So we pulled this together quite quickly, and one of the things that we did was we set up game masters in countries worldwide. In fact, one of the things we did was these game masters were in charge of really being able to alter the storyline in ways that were compelling for their region. And so we went ahead and created this game. Oh, can you put the volume up? I don't know if you can hear. That's our principal investigator. We actually had a number of actors and actresses who ended up being IBM employees. We've got a lawyer. Any volume? Nope. The lead designer who goes missing is actually one of our IP lawyers, so we had a lot of fun with her. And here comes baby. Okay, I'll just speak over it. So this is our missing lead artificial intelligence designer, and this is actually the last video for the finale of the game. And the basic premise was that she was on a world tour, she suddenly goes missing, there's an element of born identity, and basically you have to find posters that have been left in cafeterias around the world and collaborate together to determine if the poster was signed or not. You've got to find clues in all these different social business tools that are online. So in essence, to solve this problem, to solve this mystery, you actually had to use the social business tools that we wanted to introduce to people. And what was really fascinating about the whole thing was that people were collectively coming up with all kinds of new ideas with regards to what has happened to her, and was she time traveling, and what was the concept behind the real-time strategy game, and was the AI, did the AI take over? So it was really fascinating to see how IBMers reacted to this. With regards to the evolution of this space, in serious games in particular, this is a taxonomy chart, which I really appreciate. If you look at the bottom left-hand quadrant, right, where it talks about skills training, this is where about 99% of the investments in serious games have been made to date. And in essence, the return on investment here is significant, right? You're either replacing or augmenting very costly face-to-face training. But what we're seeing as the opportunity is when you start to integrate real data and real processes within games, you can start creeping up this green arrow and you make games for strategic execution and tactical operations. Meaning that as a byproduct of your gameplay, you're not just teaching somebody something, you're actually helping to optimize a very costly process and solve very costly problems. So, I'm going to show you a really quick video of how this has been implemented. This is an example, maybe, of a game that we demoed to the Department of Defense. Oh, it's okay. I'll switch to the next one. I think I'm close out of time. But come up to me afterwards. Oops. Okay, this is a game we showed to the Department of Defense. We're in essence using that same multiplayer real-time strategy gaming engine with the ability to granularly manipulate time. We've integrated real logistic data, right? Real processes such that as players join, they're using real geospatial maps. In this case, this was a demo for what was going on in Haiti. But through the gameplay, as you're playing around with what port of entry you're going to go into to deliver emergency supplies, or which supplier you're going to use, you're effectively optimizing a process on the back end. And this time manipulation component is really, really critical, because imagine what better way to optimize a process than being able to jump around the timeline and saying, okay, at this point in time, instead of making this decision, I'm going to make this other decision. And all players can do this. So again, advanced artificial intelligence on the back ends of games can be quite useful with regards to using them to solve big problems. So in conclusion, gamers are us. Games can be incredibly adept at explaining complex systems. I want to talk just really briefly about big data. I know you've heard a lot about this today, and Watson was brought up already this morning. But in fact, we have recently announced an incubator program for startups and small businesses who want to integrate their applications with the Watson API. So if you're seeking to have an artificial intelligence on the back end of your application that wants to tackle either something in the serious game space or gamification, do consider something like that. That kind of muscle on the back end could be quite useful. So again, any questions you might have, please do reach out and let me know. Thank you. Oh.
Just stay up here with me.
Okay.
One super quick second. So I have a question for you, actually. Join me over here for a sec. So one of the things that I think is really interesting about the work that you do is you often use story. And you touched on a little bit, you talked about these different stories that you went through at the company that were kind of junked and thrown out. Can you give us any kind of shorthand for your creative process around how you come up with the actual creative, like a story to apply to these kinds of projects?
It's a great question. I take the team and we lock ourselves in a room with a bunch of scones and sushi and whiteboards. Scones and sushi, critical.
I like it, I'm down.
Whoops.
Ooh. We can't stand too close together, apparently. Our energy is electric.
Sorry.
So, but you talked about that the organization kind of rejected some of those things because they were sort of dark. Yeah. Did you know that already? Like,
I thought because it would be internal that it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but it was. There's an image, a branding, and so they didn't want it to be dark. So it was actually challenging for us because we thought this has to go across ethnicity, across countries. What are the things that we can all collectively get behind, right? That we can all care about, because that was the mechanism for getting people to play. And so we started off with the villain, we scrapped that. We then thought, okay, Watson is a big celebrity. Maybe, people could get behind Watson suddenly becoming sentient, right? And he's talking to the Mars rover, and we've got to figure out what's going on. But then, the head of the Watson product said, no, absolutely not. What if it gets leaked to the press? Which is one of the reasons we put, that sign up at the beginning of the video in case people didn't understand the backstory as to why we were doing this. So then we thought more about, well, this other concept of the next grand challenge is also like a celebrity of sorts. And it's always been centered around a game. So first it was, Deep Blue competing against Grand Chess Masters. You guys remember that in the 80s? And then, Watson competing on Jeopardy. So we thought, well, it's always been about games, so why not have it be our next AI competing in a real video game, in a really complex video game, in fact, a real-time strategy game where you're not only competing, but actually collaborating together with human components, human people on the back end, right, to solve the problem. So we created this huge backstory, and that seemed to work really well. It resonated with our employees.
I love that you could come up with a story that actually is interesting to people all around the world, but also like approved by a big company's kind of filter. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it was a learning. It was learning for us.
Thank you so much,
my
Phaedra.
pleasure.
Thank you.